My goodness. I recorded 13 minutes of freestyle introduction gold with the motherfucking mute button on the microphone. Oh, God. I mean, and I guess maybe I just needed to, get all that shit out of my system. That was from my mouth to God's ears and perhaps wasn't meant for the public. I don't know what this is trying to teach me. The gist of what I was saying was, or what I want to say is, it's happening again. Another change, another level, another transformation. It's like the constant, the promise, the guarantee that God is change. Word to Octavia Butler. I am changing. Everything you touch, you change. Everything that you change changes you. All of that. And 11 days ago, I held my dog as he transitioned from living to the spirit world. Held him for his last breaths and felt his heart stop beating. And that shit has cracked me open in a way that I had never considered I might be able to feel. And what I'm learning about grief, and my grief in particular, is that the breaking open, the cracking open, the literal ache of loss and grief and heartbreak is relative to my capacity for love. And the opening is to let love in, to let people love me, to let me love me, to let me love me enough for me and how much I love my emotional support animal, fur familiar, and best friend, my dog, Avery James. And I was feeling some kind of way about talking about it, about recording today. There were some parts that were in my way of being able to start off by saying, nothing is normal. I am not the same, and I am not going to stay the same. There's a change that is taking place. You know what I mean? Like, what is the songwriter says, what a beautiful change has come over me. That's not the melody, but a change has come over me. And so in this change, it's a mess. It's a hot mess. I mean, and by hot mess, I mean, it's very fucking real. Okay. So if I was going to turn on the microphone and record the episode today and say all the things, I was just going to have to do that and have it rise up to meet me where I'm at today without preparation, planning, worrying about appearances, writing a script, taking notes, following the algorithmic information and details about how to formulaically devise and plan my offerings and what I have to give to the world. I ain't got time for that shit. This change, this breaking, this cracking open in me that has taken place is something that has really sent my interest and capacity for bullshit completely out the window. Ain't nobody got time for that. So that's just where I'm at right now. If you would like to stick around for this episode of Ask Me How I Know, we're going to get into that, into authenticity when it is unattractive, unappealing, unpolished, and real as fuck. So welcome to this week's episode of Ask Me How I Know, the podcast where I let you know exactly how I know that healing is possible, magic is real, and love is the answer. I am your host. I go by Coach Ebony said. I am a certified transformation and I am certified in transformation, equity, and liberatory coaching. My goodness. I have been coming up the rough side of the mountain for these past 11 days. And at the same time that I have been an emotional wreck, I feel so grateful for how loved I am. My goodness. My family and my friends who are my family, my friends who are my friends, associates, strangers, people I've never met before have shown me so much love and support, from Cash Apps, which went to like emergency tricking off on food and things like that because I didn't feel like cooking, or going to the grocery store, stocking up things, like taking care of Avery's end of life care and the unexpected cost of that whole procedure, checking in on me, keeping me company at nighttime after work when I am having a difficult time transitioning from dinner to bedtime and not really knowing how to turn my brain off because so many of my rituals have been disturbed in Avery's absence. The conversations, the deep, long talks that kind of fill some of the quiet that can be very loud in this time following the loss of a pet. Also, the spaciousness that my family has also given me to give me room to grieve and to be with my solitude and to be with Avery's spirit and his memory. It's been really beautiful and I'm deeply grateful, and it still fucking hurts. And I thought it was going to be easier by now. And as it turns out, it feels like it's actually kind of getting worse. And so I feel like there's this part that's maybe going to get worse before it gets better. And that's fine. But that also let me know that I could not continue to bullshit my way through performing that, like, I'm okay, because I'm not. And acting like I am, acting like any of this is okay, the things that are happening in my world and the world, Craig, the world, pretending that any of that is normal or any of it is okay is really just doing a disservice to our own humanity and not really, it's not useful. It's not helping anybody. I don't think that chaos and spinning out and losing your shit is necessarily effective. I don't know. I guess that depends on the context or the situation, because there are some times where I think you need to speak, you need to add some fire. You need to kind of speak fire. But, and this might be a teeny tiny astro tangent, but Mars has been retrograding through Cancer, which as the astro girlies have helped me to deeply understand, Mars is not happy in Cancer. And it's kind of like being up against a wall, a bit of a stalemate between like aggression and this need to nurture and slow down and pause and figure out what you're gonna do next. So that too has been an energetic thing that has been taking place since January. I guess just this past weekend on Saturday, Mars stationed direct and is now, on the move. So we will see some reprise. Venus has now decided to take its back pedal. It's going to go ahead and take that loop around the other side of its rotation through the solar system. And that's going to fuck some shit up apparently until March 6th. There's a lot of stuff about degrees and cardinal signs and which houses are being pressed a little bit more. And all I know is that my Libra stellium, Capricorn rising, Cancer descendant are all positioned right on those same degrees that are out here cutting the fuck up for a little while longer. So I'm still in it, right? Like I'm still being pressed down, shaken together, and I'm waiting for my cup to runneth over on the other side of this. But right now it's the pressing and the shaking that is taking place in my world. And if I waited for things to appear normal, I might be waiting forever because I don't really know what that looks like anymore. So, and I've said before, I've talked about, the myth of normal and how that's actually inherently dangerous for us to feel normal. So anytime that there is a call to normalize anything, it's really also a cause for suspicion. And yeah, so I don't know. I've been in deep in my emotions, in the sads, and deep in my body around them, around my feelings and my relationship to my rituals, my practices, my processes, and my relationship with grief. And as a 43-year-old Black woman, born and raised in these here United States of America, just a blackety black girl, descendant of enslaved and stolen Africans, who is native to this land. Now, I got to tell you, I've not experienced this kind of pain before, this kind of grief. I've never had a pet that was my pet. And I've heard people talk about their pets and losing them and the pain and the grief. And it is one of those things that you cannot simply understand until you feel it. And it's nothing that you want to wish on anybody, but it also isn't inevitable. And it is simply a fact of life. And it is something that even though I knew was coming, I could not have prepared myself for. And all of those things are the same and true. And just with grief, it's that thing where there's not really anything that we can say to alleviate the direct and acute pain that a person experiences. There are ways that we can provide comfort to kind of surround and to hold on the outside, but there's something that has to happen internally in the process to move through it and allow it to move through you. That has to happen, and can nobody help with that? Can nothing help with that? All the gratitude, all the love, all the community in the world, there is something that is so personal and direct that must be dealt with, and you can't rush it. I'm learning that it cannot be rushed. It is something that requires my ultimate surrender and me and all my bullshit to be like, well, girl, that's not gonna work this time. Like, I've had so many vices in my life, and, shout out to vices. Sometimes they are effective. For many years, they worked well, managed to cope in so many brilliant ways, to create technologies around vices and coping mechanisms that allowed me to strategize and play the game in my professional space and relationships. Sometimes I would shoot my shot and miss, and okay, fine. But for the most part, I was able to live well, with my vices, not succumbing to them. But over time, every round going a little bit higher, I got some more clarity and perspective on what the actual fallout and implications of my coping and my vices and my behaviors were. And so now, having arrived at this big age with this particular set of circumstances on the macro and the micro level of myself and the world, I'm just like, oh yeah, those things aren't even on the table as options. Drinking my way through this sounds terrible, because then I'm going to be drunk and sad and sick and still alone. No, thank you. I don't want to smoke my way through it. I don't want to end up paranoid. I'm not interested in that. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just, I need to honor the me of now and trust the me of now, that I have everything that I need to get through this, and anything that I don't have that I will need to go through this, Olodumare will provide. Like, I'm fine. I'm fine. My mentor and Babalao told me, Ifa, only Ifa knows the beginning and the ending of things. So I don't know how this is going to end. I don't know what's on the other side of this wall, these waves of grief. That's not my business. My business is just to keep treading water and keep breathing so that I can ride them to the other side. And that's hard. And I'm tired. And I need community. And I need support. And I need flotation devices. And I'm going to need to keep breathing to make it to the other side of this wall. And so I guess that's like my message, right? Of, if I show up fully vulnerable in the grossness and the ick of these sads right now, and just share this part of my experience of grief, to say that, like, the tears come, the sleeplessness, the agitation, the hunger without the will to eat, the need to remind myself to drink water, to like literally force myself to drink water because hydration is not doesn't feel palatable. Nothing quite tastes as good as I would like it to. I'm a bit insatiable. Things that bring me joy, typically I can come up with like 5 different reasons why not to pursue them, because the grief is kind of clouding that trajectory. That's the type of shit that I'm talking about. And I was being really hard on myself those first couple of days and trying not to admit that or own it or wanting to fix it or make it go away faster. And that has not been useful for me either. I have this, I have my mama and them, I have friends who are my family members, who understand me, who grieve Avery's loss with me, who are concerned about me. I have resources, like I have everything that I need. And one of the things that I'm lacking is like the physical connection of like shared space and intimacy of just being with, like the physical presence of a familiar or kin or loved one. That has been really difficult. And so I'm trying to think about ways I can put myself in spaces where there's other humans to kind of help my nervous system regulate on a human level, because also I realized my nervous system was very hardwired or wired in sync with Avery's nervous system. And so that energy is gone, and there is a part of me that is searching for that connection. And I think it would benefit my brain and my nervous system to have an opportunity to co-regulate with humans so that it can remember that part of how I'm also wired, right, inherently. So that's just a bit about what's happening in I Refuse to Act Like It's Not. So there's that. This week I had mentioned that I was going to talk about the DEI lie. I was going to address some of the recent ways that diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, which were popularized in 2020, but is work that has been a continuation of the civil rights movement and women's lib and, pretty much every civil liberties initiative since time was popularized, maybe became a little notoriously popularized in 2020 around the murder of George Floyd. Those initiatives fell away at the inauguration of 47. So everybody's been all up in arms, blaming DEI for everything, blaming woke for everything. And I was going to come on here, and in my mind, I was like, I'm going to prepare this whole talk, and I'm going to walk through my experience with diversity, equity, inclusion, and talk about what it is and what it isn't and who benefits. And I feel like that contribution at this point feels redundant and unnecessary, and feels like me committing or wasting my time, talent, and the treasure of my lived experience in these industries, in this body, for my whole Black ass life. It would be me making a contribution to a conversation that is insistent on silencing me, or not even silencing me, but ignoring me, right? And I don't do that. In 2021, I started to say I realized that the jig was up. I understood that the diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives were not, I quickly realized that those initiatives were not sustainable. I also realized that organizations that were operating under the guise of, we just want to listen, we just want to help, we just want to know what we can do, we're going to run a mile for Ahmaud Arbery tomorrow. I realized that they didn't mean it. And not because they didn't understand it, but because there was a refusal to understand it. There was a refusal to act, to notice. There was a refusal to defy the power and authority of their internalized white heteropatriarchal standard of supremacy, whether it was their daddy, their husbands, their sons, not just for white women, but for dominant cultural society of whiteness and those who believe themselves to be white in this country in particular. I was like, oh, this is not, I could see it. I was like, this is not sustainable. And we will be the scapegoats. I would be the scapegoat. They're going to turn on us when it's no longer convenient or popular, when there's been a shift in attention, when the lens moves focus and then kind of turns its target to another place. There will be consequences and repercussions here for this work. And that's fine, because there always has been, but I was looking at it like, how can I divest from my identity being solely tethered to this work in D for the purpose of facilitating the comfort of whiteness? Because that's not what I intend to do. But that seems to be the only way that they will receive any information I have to share about racial equity and social justice. So how do I divest from whiteness being at the center of my work? Because that's not what I'm here for. And that was really important. That was an important shift that I was making. I had to be vocal about it. I had to practice it. I lost a lot of business. I lost a lot of contracts. I lost clients I lost so-called friends. Relationships ended. I took people to task. I was down in Albuquerque tussling with the mayor's office and with leaders and in community, shaking tables and flipping a few over, walking away from others, and really taking folks to task on how their bullshit was smelling, right? And how they could clean it up, and basically demanding that they be accountable and responsible for it. And that was really an unpopular period in my life, but it was so necessary, so necessary. And it helped me become clearer about my true purpose, the essence of who I am, the blessing that is on my life, and what I know of miracles. And I was really able to kind of shift and move myself into a position where I was like, how could I no longer have my livelihood be dependent upon my ability to make white folks comfortable, or to entertain white people, or to make white women feel good about themselves? I couldn't do that no more. But I had to pray about it. I had to work on it. I had to work in spirit and in the flesh to make that, to extract myself from this particular system, the plantation of the way that my Black womanness was being perceived, and the boxes that it had me trapped in on a soul level. So I guess my relationship to DEI really goes beyond whatever the fuck they're talking about down here at these town hall meetings and in the White House. They don't even know what they're talking about, because they're using DEI as a proxy for anti-Black misogynoir, anti-Blackness in general. So like there's that, for capitalism, for the carceral state, for systemic oppression, for medical racism, for all of it. Like the DEI that's not really what they mean to say. Just like when they say woke, it's a substitute for the hard R in word. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't even call it a dog whistle, because it's right. So as they co-opt and redefine these words, to throw them back in our face, I'm just kind of like, wow, I don't, it's not an I told you so that's in my spirit, but it is like I saw this coming. We saw this coming. I'm not the only one who saw this coming. I was sitting at a conference of DEI leaders, Black folks who were working in independent schools in 2021, at a conference in Seattle, and 2020, in 2020, in a conference in Seattle, and really having a conversation with a room of about 450 Black and brown, Black, it was an affinity group, Black DEI professionals who were having conversations about what does it mean to, how do you secure your own dignity at work? Dignity. We were think taking how to have dignity at work, because all of us were being robbed of our dignity in the name of doing these jobs, which essentially was like at the same time that we were trying to appeal to the comforts of the administration and white folks, mostly it was our job to try to protect the Black and brown students who were being most severely impacted by systemic oppression, and racism and classism. And that was a whole nother ball of bullshit. But yeah, I saw it not be, I was like, the end game here does not look promising. I think a lot of that became apparent because of the white folks that I would encounter. The challenges, the setbacks, the confrontations, the microaggressions, the macroaggressions, the aggressions, the doxing, the attacks, the meetings, the passive aggression. Like, it was just so many things that took place during that period of time. And through each interaction, I was like figuring it out. I was strategizing around plotting my escape, not realizing at the time that when you get free, you experience a period of fugitivity. You become a fugitive. And then you got to figure out who's safe, who is friend and who is foe. And that can be hard. nearly impossible, always very dangerous, isolating, lonely sometimes, but you need people, right? You need community. So there is also this piece of like, you have to show up in community, sometimes new communities, or you need to go back to a community. And then when you're in there, you're like, who in this community is still out here doing the master's work with the master's tools? Because you're an op now, right? It becomes a very difficult transition. But another one of those times in my life that was like a transformation, of change that was coming over me, that I was experiencing while I was still holding on to a lot of the vices that I had been coping with for so many years. Because it wasn't the first time that I had been the only Black girl in the room. I think my experience throughout childhood, the way that I was raised, like I grew up in an inkwell of a Black community in a very Black traditional, multi-generational household, and then went to predominantly white schools in a predominantly white district where I was one of the only. So, I was very aware of my race, or I was aware of my Blackness and not so much made aware of the perils of whiteness. You know what I mean? Where it didn't really matter so much that white folks were racist because we were the shit and they were racist. I didn't think that there was anything wrong with me because of my Blackness. As an adult in the Southwest, I started to experience it in a different way, where anti-Blackness was something that was like a silent killer, like a quiet, passive aggressive, like a feigned ignorance, a willful ignorance that was really dangerous, that could find you in a bunch of places with other brown folks where you feel like you might be safe to talk about liberatory concepts and themes and desires and hopes for imagining a future where we are all free, or even articulating that you yourself, that I myself am free. And I have watched Black and brown folks be like, even it's wild. It's a very, very wild reality. The DEI conversation of 2025, of like, I'm sitting with it being like, I'm noticing the conversation about it in the social media realm, which is like it's very much a vacuum, and a little tiny bubble that I've curated based off the people that I follow and the people who follow them. So I'm not trying to make mass judgments, but that is the way that we receive and get information and are in conversation with folks, right? I'm noticing the conversations around it, and I'm kind of like, I don't know that I have too much to add. I think a lot of people have really strong opinions about it, not really having any context for it or understanding how it applies or who it applies to. I think that Black people, by and large, there's a small percentage of Black folks who are ever really involved in the DEI conversation from a professional perspective anyway. So by and large, I think Black folks are kind of like, what the fuck are you talking about? I've always been the only person at my job, the only Black person at my job, or I've always been one of many, or we don't know white people work where we work or live where we live. There's a different kind of way that I think Black folks come at DEI that is less, it doesn't have anything to do with academia. It doesn't have anything to do with like pay bands in the non-public profit sector. And while that is true for some people, I think the totality of it is that it's being presented on the political stage as this new concept, some new radical concept that is ravaging the fabric of society. And that is simply not true. It's not. It's simply not true. It got popularized by a bunch of nervous white folks when everybody was in the house and George Floyd was murdered on camera. And I think that was used as a way to kind of double that. The same thing is true of woke. The concept of being woke was language that was being shared in student diversity conferences by Black kids who were talking about, Black kids from Brooklyn and from the East Coast who were talking about, being 5%ers and, talking about being woke with kids who are from the desert in Arizona and New Mexico. And they're like, what does that even mean? And just getting their minds blown by concepts around Pan-Africanism and Afrofuturism as concepts. And they become awakened to these concepts that they hadn't heard before, and then come back to their schools in these rural Southwestern cities. And they're like, Miss Booth, let's start a diversity group. We're going to rename the student diversity group to woke, but we can't figure out a name for it, or we can't figure out an acronym for it. What does woke stand for? And I was like, y'all, woke doesn't stand for anything. It just means woke, like awake, like you woke, like you're awakened, you're awake to, you woke from the sleep, the slumber of the comfort of this capitalist, racist, imperialist society. That you woke from the dream, the American dream, and realized that is not in fact a dream at all. That's what woke means. And they're like, but like, how do we explain that to get people to join? This is a true story. This is a true fucking story. 2018, 2019. This is what the students were talking about. Seniors in high school at an independent school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Minds blown. What is it? We need to start a club. We need an acronym. We need an acronym. So those parents, those conservative Christian parents with those conservative ideals were like, what the fuck is this Black woman teaching these kids? And I was like, this is just woke as in awake. I don't know. Like, what do you want me to say? So yeah, I think I'm kind of rambling now, which I'm entitled to do. Whatever. Fuck it. But the DEI lie is just that. And I think that we're here because Barack Obama was president for 2 terms. And I don't say that like, I know I giggle, I chuckle when I say that, not because it's funny, but it's kind of funny because it's just like, oh, we're still, so this country continues to be worried about the wrong shit. That is the bottom line. Worried about the wrong shit. Not willing to actually look at like, you know, having to reconcile the sins of capitalism and the long-term impacts of that. And how do you maintain a capitalist society if you don't have an underclass who will work for free or for a minimum wage that has been the same for generations? And there was no contingency plan for what to do without slaves. And if we say that this is if I say that this is a byproduct of, or this is happening because Barack Obama was president for 2 terms, running on an agenda of change and hope, it can also be said that this is happening because of the Civil War and the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, and there never having been a plan in place where anybody was imagining what to do when when we do not own slaves anymore. When we are no longer slaveholders, what does the Constitution mean? So the reason that they are gutting bureaucracy is to say, if that document is the only thing that is preventing us from being able to go back to a place where capitalism is the machine, then we need to switch. Fine, we'll move from a democratic republic to a dictatorship and an oligarchy. That's what we'll do. We'll stop running the constitutional play. We'll stop giving a damn about civil liberties. We don't give a fuck about civics or rights or voters. Who cares? We'll make all that shit illegal. Beat it. If paperwork and law is what is in place, we'll go ahead and, we'll fix the court and fire the pencil pushers and just run the jewels. We'll take it. And so that's what's happening. That's what's happening. All this other conjecture about it having anything to do with DEI is a fucking distraction. It's a distraction. They're mad that they can't extract slave labor anymore. So they're trying to figure out ways to do it by disappearing Mexican nationals and immigrants from all over that they find. They want to disappear them and put them into labor camps to force labor to continue to make money. I don't know. I might get in trouble for saying that. But don't nobody be paying attention to this podcast any damn way. And that's just one theory. I might be wrong. I don't know. And so what do you do about it? I think you keep living in joy and community with all the good sense that God gave you. And you stay ready to defend your humanity and the humanity of those that you live with and around and near. I think that's what we do. I think that we stay woke. I think that we do not allow ourselves to be distracted. I think that we tap into our ancestral wisdom and spiritual gifts of discernment. I think that we learn that comfort is not promised. Comfort is a construct or a characteristic of white supremacist society, that we feel like, I know that we might want ease. I know Black women, 92%, we want to rest. We don't want to fix it for white people. I understand that, but make no mistake, that does not mean that you will not have to do the work to maintain it for yourself and your kinfolk and your family and your children and your communities. That work is essential. Figuring out that piece of it is fine. You don't have to run into any burning buildings for the name of protecting white folks or whiteness, or doing the work of whiteness and their feelings and their appeals to our leadership because shit has just gotten so dire. That's just another way for us to be fodder for their entertainment, right? That's not them putting any quote unquote skin in the game. So I don't think that that's what we should be doing at all. I think it's important to rest and understand that we're resting because there is work to be done. And this could very well get hard, real hard. And so whatever you're going through that's real hard right now, whatever that might be, it's training day for some more hard shit to come. It's not without joy, not without an eventual peace. It's important for us to keep a vision, liberatory vision of the future that we are working towards. What we want to see, for us to dream and articulate and speak out loud and write it in our journals and hold it in our heart and whisper it to our babies and share it in song, and to make art and to be fully fledged in all of our humanness toward that future. And we have to rest so that we can work, because we have to produce what needs to be produced in order to be in community. So I realize that people might disagree with that. I welcome disagreement. I'm not even sure that I know that to be 100% factual. I'm not saying that with an authority of being like, that's what you ought to do. I'm saying it like, as I minister to you, I'm speaking to myself. That's what's coming into my spirit right now. What seems like what can be done, what could be done, what I am doing, how I'm moving forward. And so I'm sharing it with you in just the spirit of that realness, of being like, this is the shit that I'm thinking about, and this is what I want to say. And on community, the impacts of these systems, systemic oppression, racism, enslavement, misogynoir, patriarchy, imperialist society, settler colonialism, the isms and schisms and systems have impacted us to great degrees on a cellular level, for sure. I don't think it has caused a mutation that is like irreversible or irredeemable, or like, I don't think that we're broken by any stretch of the imagination. I think that if anything, it's kind of fortified our resilience and our capacity to be genius, brilliant in knowing our enemy and understanding and being able to read for our safety in some really profound ways. And I think one of the impacts is that it has caused such division within us on a singular level, where there are parts of us that have been fractured or broken apart from the core self of who we were put here to be. And we are oftentimes led around by those parts, sometimes the loudest, most aggressive, most pointy, most protective, hardest parts are running the show in a way that doesn't really allow us to access the creativity, the compassion, the clarity, the calmness, and these other components of ourselves that make us more of a whole and fully fledged version of our humanness, so that when we show up in community, we come to it in ways where we are present and ready to connect, or are able to connect, right? To tap in, to be with, to stand alongside, to get in the circle, to jump in the ropes, to, like, to hop in and know that, we clapping on the 2, on the 1 and the 2 and the 4, you know what I mean? Like, I think that on an individual level, those fractures and breakdowns are not permanent. I think that when I say healing is possible, that's essentially what I'm talking about. That mending of bringing those parts together, gathering up oneself in all of those shards and broken and sharp and pointy and hard pieces. When I say healing is possible, that is what I'm talking about. That healing is possible. There is an alchemical magic that takes place in making apparent what has previously been unseen when those parts show up as whole, and then you see yourself whole. You have no idea what's on the other side. Only Ifa knows the beginning and the end. But when you become whole and can see yourself whole, see yourself for in the fullness and the who-ness of you, that's where magic happens. And that is something that is like so fucking real. That's where love lives. Love is the answer there. So when we talk about community, I think a lot of us talk about needing community, not ever having had it or acknowledged it, or maybe when we have been in it, it has not been safe. Maybe there have been many fractured parts, driven versions of different folks and archetypes in community, in roles of leadership, in positions of authority, done unthinkable things. It's likely it happened to me. I mean, I've been in some wild community spaces where it's like, oh, this is not healthy for anybody. My goodness, especially me. I got to get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? Now I'm on the run again. Now I'm a fugitive looking for a new place to be. And then I'm going to show up with all my sharp edges and all my parts and all my bullshit. And now I'm defensive and forthright, and I'm hiding things, and I'm coping to hide the other things, and I'm suspicious, and I got trust issues, and, whew, right? So on a community level, you too are a community of all of your parts of yourself, all versions of yourself. There's this internal community, and the health of that community does not mean that you can't be in a larger community until you become whole in self. But I think the awareness that that is what is happening is an amazing place to start, because then you can start to find people and places. You will start to identify and resonate with people and places who will meet you where you are, because they're in alignment with those core values that you have. They're in alignment with their ability to meet their willingness to meet your needs, or to support you in the care and keeping of you and having your needs met in ways that make you feel good about yourself instead of bad, right? And then you can continue to take actions maybe together in those relationships, in those partnerships, that will allow you to come more steps closer to a fuller expression of your true and authentic self. That is my prayer, my intention, and my belief that that is possible. Community on a larger scale, a lot of folks just don't know what they're doing. And it's not, think about it. Like, it's been demonized, broken down, ridiculed, talked about. Our leaders have been murdered. Organizations have been dismantled. Bombs have been dropped on blocks and houses. Look at what they did to the Black Panther Party, and Fred Hampton was murdered while sleeping in his bed. Like, all of these things, these movements that have been community-based organizational movements that have been led by organizers, administrators, cooks, mothers, daycare providers, prayer warriors, drivers, security folks, seamstresses, the community all had to show up in order for some shit to shake, right? And I think in the decimation of those institutions, the community-wide institutions, we've lost, we've lost a lot of the recipes. We've lost a lot of the leadership. Our relationship with intergenerational leadership and learning from our elders, or being able to sit at the feet of our elders to learn how they did a thing down to the details, right? Of like learning the ritual, learning the recipe, learning the order of service, learning okay, so before we go in and say that this is hierarchical and wrong, let me just understand what the hierarchy is, because maybe there's something to that structure that will aid in creating a system that gives us a more functional way to execute. How can we increase our registrants? How can we increase the number of donations we receive? How do we expand our network to connect more people? How do we take this conversation offline and put it into actual community work and awareness? And there are ways to do that. I did not learn how to do that in corporate America. I got by. I did well in corporate America because I learned how to do that in Black communities. I learned how to do it in church. I learned how to do it in my granddaddy's church. I learned how to do it by watching my grandmother. I learned how to do it by watching my mother and my family members and my relatives and the community leaders down to the Jerseyland Community Center. And I learned it in community. Now I want to help social justice leaders do that by coaching them on how they work with healing that internal community, this internal family system of community that's going on within us in all of our parts, and how once that happens, we can carry that into and start to project that healing and that magic and that love into larger community spaces, and how that becomes a sustainable model for how we can co-create a future without genocide and the carceral state and fascism and capitalism and misogynoir and abuse of power, right? So yeah, that's just some of the things that are on my mind, which is a lot of shit that's on my mind, because that ain't even everything that's on my mind, but it's a lot. So yeah, I think I'm supposed to say this at the beginning of the show to like let people know who don't know who I am and why I think this way. I started off an English major, focused on creative writing in a dual degree program for my undergraduate degree in English and creative writing, the minor in urban studies, and a master's in curriculum and instruction at the University of Denver. I left DU because of a lot of issues, mostly a lack of support as a first generation adult student. I was just like, what the fuck? And had I known better, I would have stayed one more year and been done. But I gave up. I stopped with about a year left in my program and eventually moved to New Mexico. I transferred and went back to school, which was basically like starting over from like an associate's degree. They just knocked all my coins out of my credits. And so I started over again and went back to school and studied women, gender, and sexuality studies and a certification in race and social justice. I graduated my degree there. I got a coaching certification in coaching for transformation and equity. I was a fellow in the UK Kellogg Foundation's, that's a whole nother story, Kellogg Foundation's community leader fellows, I don't know, for like race and social justice or something like that. Apparently at the time they sold us on how much of a prestigious fellowship or cohort it was. I'm still unconvinced about the truth of that, but I tend to be the black sheep in a lot of spaces, so whatever. And then I joined working with CHJL, develop a virtual alumni network of about 10 cohorts worth of liberatory coaches who were either certified in transformation and equity and or liberatory coaching through coaching for healing, justice, and liberation. And so I got my second coaching certification my first year there, and I now work to create digital community among 257 alumni members, and I organize in-person convenings and manage the programs and in community development in that space. I also started my consultancy as a coach and cultural strategist in 2018, Honeysuckle Creatives, where I work with nonprofit organizations, foundations, and small businesses around, you know, creating mission-aligned activations for community engagement and coaching in nonviolent communication and the equity space inside those organizations, doing leadership development and the like. And my jam, what really lights me up is working with Black women in leadership roles, be in practice with them about wholeness and the truth of healing, magic, and love for Black women and the power of that, and how that reverberates to impact communities at large. And so that's the work that I do. And I don't I guess I don't really talk about like how deep in these streets I am, but I've been a community organizer since I can remember. My grandmother and her sisters-in-law and other ministers' wives had a group called the Jolly Club, where they were a women's mutual aid group that met for luncheons and dinners and also supported one another in child rearing and chores and cooking dinner and, supporting through domestic violence and, jobs and congregations and those things. So I come from that kind of folks, you know what I mean? So gathering in community spaces, preparing a place for people to feel invited and welcome and that they belong in, literally is just kind of like at the core of who I am in my DNA. And I have done that for so much of my life in so many spaces and times. But doing that for Black people, Honeysuckle Creatives, my, mission is really to create experiences for Black and brown folks because we deserve to see ourselves elevated. Like, we deserve to have dope shit that's for us, that we love and enjoy. And so that's what I do. I do that in community for communities. And the more I learn about my internal community and heal that and show up as my whole self, very real as fuck, the better it is for everybody. So yeah, I've been talking since I was like 9 months old, and I can definitely run my mouth. I'm one of those kids who got talks too much on every progress report, and that's just what it is. So I'm not bothered by that or ashamed about it anymore. I feel like that's what I'm here for. I fucking use language to express myself and to share what I'm channeling. And I'm working on ways to be able to do that with my writing more in the not too distant future. But yeah, so that's what I'm holding. Grief is real. It is teaching me much about my capacity for love and allowing me to make more room for love, because that is the thing that is going to soothe the ache of loss. DEI is a distraction. We've been out here, and we ain't going nowhere because we know what it is already. Community is, and it starts with you. It starts with self. It really does. Really it ends and begins and ends again with self, with you. And I think we need support. If we're going to say that community is a solution, we need to support each other in building healthy and sustainable communities and being able to admit when we don't really know how to do that or haven't really seen successful examples of that enough. And so we could benefit from more. We got to figure out how to get vulnerable enough to say so and know that there is help out there for you. There are folks who will support you. Yeah. So that's this week's episode. I'm real grateful to you for listening or watching wherever you are. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to YouTube and to whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, whether that's Apple or Spotify or Amazon Podcasts or whatever. If you get down with my get down, tell a friend, write me a comment. I love getting your letters. You can send me a question at Ask Auntie. The email address is hello@ebonyisisbooth.com. And just put in the subject line, Ask Auntie, and I will answer you with my whole chest. But until next time, that is all for this time. Be light and shine. Kayla, you. Bye.